Okay, you're on.
Hello, Internet. Welcome. I'm Danielle Young, and welcome to the first of what will hopefully be a long series of the Oak and Lily study group. And Oak and Lily is a study/discussion group for specifically pertaining to issues relating to young people's teens and 20-somethings. If you have any questions out there, please feel free to jump in the chat and pop your questions in, and we can discuss. As this is our first one, we're just going to be sort of getting to know each other, getting stories. Myself, I got into the craft roughly 10 years ago through a convoluted series of events, starting with my cat's death. My cat, Elsie, was 22 years old. I was 13 at the time when we had to put her down. And I was a good little Jewish girl up until that point, until about a week after Elsie was put down, and she was like family to me. And the rabbi told me cats don't have souls. And in my heart of hearts, I could not believe this. So I went on a little journey of discovery, looking for a faith that sort of matched what I believed. When I was 14, and in high school, a friend plopped down Silver Ravenwolf's Teen Witch in my lap, and I went, my gosh, this all relates to things that I believe. And I started studying on my own for a very long time, reading Cunningham, dealing with the internet and the variable amounts of good information there. And then I became a part of the Corellian tradition. And I believe in the concept of deity as the diamond with many facets. It's one universal constant that breaks itself down into gods and goddesses, but that the gods and goddesses as the facets are whole and complete beings in and of themselves, just as we are also parts of the diamond, but we are whole and complete beings in and of ourselves. I have Anubis as my patron, and I'm currently working with Anubis, Odin, Ron, and on and off with Hermes, the god of travel. And I'm quite enjoying having this relationship with these deities, working with them and having it sort of a two-way conversation with them. And let's move on to Alfred and see what he has to say.
Yes.
Your story.
My little story about how I entered the craft. Well, we might get a few groans out there on internet land, but a friend of mine, his name was James, we got together. We were always into the paranormal, is really the thing, and I should preface this by saying that I was brought up, half my family were Protestants, particularly members of something called the Union religion, not to be confused with the Unitarian Universalist religion. The Union religion is actually an amalgam of Episcopalian, Puritan, Baptist, all that thing come into one singular congregation. And there was a schism, a legitimate schism in the congregation I was at, in which it split right down the middle between these really fundamentalist folks and these really more down-to-earth, not as hyper-conservative people. And I left that congregation. The other half of my family was brought up Irish Catholic, but I was not in contact with them from almost the very beginning because we were Protestants. But I had a friend James who I met after the schism happened, and I left that congregation, and we got into the paranormal together. I mean, everything from ghost hunting to cryptozoology, all of that stuff we really got into. So Halloween was a big thing for us, and we were looking around, in various places inside Boston, because we said we didn't want to go to Salem for Halloween, So let's go somewhere, big choir, let's go to Boston. So we looked at places a couple of months beforehand, and we found this psychic parlor, this tea room in Boston, the famed Tremont Tea Room, great place, by the way. So we went there, we hung out. We thought it was just like this place to go out and drink tea and hang out in Halloween and costume. But when we actually went there, we discovered it was a bunch of practicing pagans, Wiccans, that also happened to be psychics. And lo and behold, they were having something that to us was so out of it. Like, they're having a Samhain ritual. What the heck is a Samhain ritual? So they told us, well, why don't you come down to the Commons and participate? So, after debate between myself and James, we were like, okay, well, why don't we go do it? So we participated in the ritual, and the rest was history. Our first magical teacher there was the Reverend High Priestess Kay Dunn. And she was our first magical teacher. And unfortunately, though, the group began to waver a little bit. So we went back to my hometown in Wakefield, where we met a mutual friend, who's been a practicing Wiccan apparently since before grade school. So it's like, why don't we found a coven? I wasn't in any position to do so, but we tried anyway. And unfortunately, to keep a long story short, things went sour very fast. So I actually tried to leave the craft altogether. But then eventually my friend James and I reconnected, and we started to read and to discuss and to perform private rituals with ourselves. And then our friend Kelly came in and she joined us, and we had this little 3 triumvirate. But finally we went our separate ways within the craft, because he was more into Reiki and more into what feels like stereotypical New Age stuff. Kelly was only purely into the psychism, but I really wanted a structured religion. So I looked through job listings, and on Craigslist, here I was, World of Witches Museum. Oh, hey, be a tour guide in Salem. All right, let's go check that out. So become a tour guide, discovered the Correllian tradition here, and I got really interested really fast. Got to know the Reverend Don Lewis and everything, all the other wonderful Correllians that are here. And I said, hey, I actually have a structured religion. Rituals are more energized than I've ever seen them. And I really kind of fell into it again by coming to the World of Witches, and got dedicated to the temple, and hopefully I'll achieve my first degree, shortly. So that is my strange story about how I stumbled into the craft. Yeah.
And how do you see deity?
My patron deity right now, to my understanding, is Freya. So I do work with Freya. But I do very much respect the concept of deity as the diamond, certainly. Because no matter how you perceive what God, Goddess, Spirit is, whatever word you use, everybody sees it differently. And every way they see it should be beautiful. So much as the diamond has many facets which are all beautiful, so should deity in all its many faces be beautiful. That's pretty much my interpretation of deity.
Do we have any comments in the chat room? Yeah. Well, what are some of the issues you've run into as a young person in the craft?
Oh, goodness. Well, I don't talk to a lot of my old high school friends anymore. A lot of them are uncomfortable with having, oh, he's a witch. Oh, he practices magic. He must be foolish, and So I don't really talk to them anymore. So but there are still some there are still some of them that say, oh, that's not a problem. I don't really. He's still Al. He's still Alfred. Mm-hmm. That's fine. And but I don't talk to any of my Catholic family members. Haven't done that for years. I've actually found it necessary to now officially move out because of my religion, but I'm willing to do that, and it's going to be hard, and it's also going to probably annoy a lot of people, yeah. Particularly those that I'm moving in with. But and also I haven't, to a lot of people that I do know and still talk to, they don't necessarily realize that I am out of the broom closet, but those are the biggest issues. But everything else, it's more so that doors have been opened rather than closed. Yeah. So
I was very lucky in high school. My friends were either very understanding or were also Wiccan. Mm-hmm. But I faced some religious discrimination as well. that's really going to be the focus of next week's discussion, and hopefully we'll have more people for that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm hoping to talk about things like ethical magic,
Mm-hmm.
which is important for young people. I know I had a hard time grasping ethical magic when I was a teenager and figuring out what that meant to me, because one person's ethics are not another person's ethics, and some people follow the Wiccan Rede and it harm none, do what you will, and other people don't.
Mm-hmm.
So struggling with that, especially in context of love magic, that tends to be a really big thing with teenagers.
Oh, because of free will. You know,
Yes.
they're trying to attract the next best romance, but if you're trying to attract a person, you know,
Yes.
that nullificates free will.
Mhm.
So,
Attracting the wrong kind of attention.
mm-hmm.
Is there anything you would like to see covered in this study group?
Well, certainly ethical magic as well, but again, I think what actually would also be personal to both of us. I think would be the act, perhaps talking about the act of coming out of the broom closet, for lack of a phrase. You know, actually
Yes.
telling people, "Hey, I'm a witch," you know, and laying it out on the table, because that's very difficult for a lot of people. So,
Yes.
but then again, you also have the idea of the second generations, which, in my opinion, tend to be a little lucky if they want
Yeah.
to follow that
If
particular
they choose to follow.
Yeah.
But you still have a lot of, this is a apologies. This is still a faith system with a lot of converts,
Mhm.
as opposed to people being raised in it, comparatively.
Well, I mean, there are second generations out there, but
Mm-hmm.
never have I heard of a third generation.
Not yet.
You know, but there are people that call themselves hereditary witches, and if that's the case, yeah.
Familial tradition.
Yeah, and
Another
that's
thing
something
that you
else.
brought up was another thing I wanted to talk about, is the idea of practicing in groups
Mhm.
and creating your own tradition.
Mhm.
is well, first is the idea even really technically feasible for someone who's young or new to the craft?
Mhm.
Should they be going about doing this? How to go about managing a group to the best of their abilities?
Mhm.
Leadership within the community.
It was very difficult in my case. It almost ruined my ideas of the craft. So it can be a dangerous thing. However, you know, there are people out there that can actually do it and have done it. I mean, my friend James is doing his own thing out in New York right now, and he tried again and he has succeeded, and I wish him the best. So.
There will be optional reading for this study group. You don't have to read this book. I just recommend it as a good starting point for young people in the craft. Is Gide Parma's book Spirited,
Oh yeah.
which he wrote when he was a teenager, about being advice for teenagers within the craft.
Mhm.
How to deal with things at school, when you're traveling, how to work with your family, a lot of things, and I seriously recommend it as a jumping off point.
Very cool.
So,
Very cool. Yeah, no, I've heard that Gide Parma, he's still fairly young.
yes,
It's still yet respected within the craft.
yes, he's one of the few, like we mentioned, who's managed to start his own tradition
Mm-hmm.
and keep it going and have it not only grow but thrive.
Mm-hmm.
And I was lucky enough to meet him when he came to visit last October.
Very nice.
So, any comments, questions?
What is the purpose of the Ogun Lily study group?
The Oak and Lily Study Group is to discuss issues relevant to teens and 20-somethings, particularly issues relating to coming into the craft, those who may be new, those who issues like dealing with things in school.
Though maybe those that are particularly interested in the craft happen to be young, don't really know how to start.
Exactly.
So,
to explain where oak and lily came from, that actually came from besides the deities I work with, I also work with a concept of the triple goddess and the horned god in the forms of the star mother and river father. And their respective, in my view, their respective plants are the oak and the lily. So that is where the name is derived from.
mm-hmm.
So,
Very cool.
any questions?
Seems straightforward to me, but if there's anything out there.
Anything out there?
So what would our goal be for next week then?
For next week, to prepare for discussion on religious intolerance. If you can bring in I would love if you could bring in some articles.
Interesting, okay.
Search for newspaper articles, because they are out there, and it's not just kids being discriminated against. It tends to be widespread throughout the craft, but to also come prepared with stories of your own personal experiences with discrimination because you are a witch or a Wiccan, whatever label you wish to use for the craft and your practice of it. And we will discuss how to deal with discrimination, how to teach people, leave the doors open, when to walk away from people who do not wish to understand the craft, and basically positive methods to deal with when you are discriminated and who to go to aid you with these things.
Very cool.
So, I believe that is it for this week. Hopefully I will see all of you next week here at the Oak and Lily Study Group and be prepared for discussion on religious discrimination.